Have you heard about this project by the Washington Post, The New Normal? It's a 5-part series on race in America, and it's compelling, thought provoking. It has the power to dismantle systematic racism, probably has too much power. And that's why we're seeing people who identify as not racist attack it and attack the people who created it, including Resmaa Menakem, who's pictured here. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He'll be joining us in just a few minutes. But before he joins us, I mean, this project is receiving attacks from the New York Post, Fox News, and so many other national outlets who lack cultural competency. Before Resmaa joins us, I want to play for you a clip by Fox News. We're going to hear a few clips from the project first, and then commentary by Tucker Carlson. Take a listen.
A living, embodied anti-racist culture does not exist among white people. White people got to start getting together specifically around race.
White accountability groups are really helpful.
There's a period of deep shame for being white.
This is really sick, and it's a complete dead end that will tank the country if we allow it to continue. Everyone is created equal in the eyes of God, and if you don't act that way and judge people based on who they are and what they do, the choices they make, and instead judge them on the color of their skin, it's over.
If you judge people instead by the color of their skin, it's over. But that's what America has been doing. That's what's been happening to Black people. Resmaa?
Yeah. See, when you have carnival barkers and grifters show up as being somebody who is in a position of what they describe as authority, what you have is somebody whose bottom line is they are about their own self-aggrandizement. They're about their own enrichment. And so the reason why he said that like that, the reason why he made that move is that he knows that there are white people. His audience are mostly white people. And he knows that when he says stuff like that, it gets them into a fervor, right? This whole thing right now, if Tucker Carlson walks down the street and he slips on some ice, he's going to say critical race theory did that. If he gets into a car accident, he's going to say critical race theory did that. Anything, because here's what they know. They know that these things are dog whistles for a lot of the people that watch their channels. And so what you have is this guy who's sitting up here talking about things, but the first thing he has to do is decontextualize it. Notice what he did. He said, if this guy is basing what he's saying based on people's skin, then the country is in trouble. And that's the epitome of racism. And the only way he can say that is to decontextualize what actually is people's lived experience, right? When we talk about critical race theory, what we have to do is we have to talk about non-critical race theory first, right? And non-critical race theory is the fact that we think, and in the textbooks and what people have been told is that many of the people who owned Black people, right, that they were benevolent and that they treated their slaves well, and that they really, because they owned those slaves, that they treated them like property, and who would damage their property. And we should understand that our forefathers were really great people, even though they owned slaves, right? That's non-critical. When we talk about things like the indigenous genocide, right? And that it wasn't so bad for indigenous people. Those things are not critical. We are not critically thinking about the things that are happened or have happened to people. And so critical race theory is just the way that it sounds. It is taking a critical lens as to what is the function of white body supremacy, how has it impacted people, and how does it continue to impact people through structures, through philosophy, and through keeping power at the hands of a few elite white bodies, right? And to the detriment of everybody else. That's critical race theory, but we live under a structure that is predicated on non-critical race theory. That's why they lose their minds when somebody like me says white people got to get together and look at the stuff that's going on with them, and look at the things that have happened to them, and look at the things that have happened to them from elite white bodies to poor white bodies, and how that trauma transcended time. That makes their hair go on fire.
Now, Tucker at Fox News is not the only one who had something to say about this project. Ben Shapiro, who has a very large following online, dedicated almost an entire episode to attacking this project. We're going to play a clip for you guys and stop at certain points to address the misinformation that he presents. Take a listen.
This is racist crap, because here's the Washington Post lead story yesterday. Again, from Washington Post, The Lily. Understanding your white identity. Now, you may have thought to yourself, I don't really have a white identity. Like for me, I'd be considered white by these folks. I'm Jewish. My identity is many different things, but kind of in terms of ethnicity, it's more Jewish because that actually connects to how I act in the real world. And honestly, I don't care about ethnicity. So my Jewish ethnic identity is really only tied into the fact that as the son of a Jewish mother, I am religiously Jewish, right? By that law. But my ethnicity really has nothing to do with it. And the idea of a general white identity is also very weird, because the only aspect of quote unquote white identity is generally in American history in opposition to quote unquote black identity or Asian identity or Mexican identity. But the reality is that for the vast majority of history, and including American history, people didn't see themselves in terms of white identity. Okay, they saw themselves in terms of sort of where they came from. There was Irish identity, there was Italian identity, there was Czech identity, there was Jewish identity.
Oh, okay, let's pause here. Let's talk about the fact that Black people didn't really have a choice to have an identity.
Right.
And the privilege that even for Ben to identify or not identify as a Jewish man, and
Absolutely.
all of these other white folks who have had the privilege to identify as German or to know where they came from. In order for me to know how I can identify with my African heritage, my African identity, I have to dig and search.
Yes.
And I might not even find it because it was taken from me. It was hidden from me because of the fact my ancestors were stolen.
That's right.
From their land.
Right.
And so I don't have the privilege
Right.
to identify with where my people came from. In fact, I'm labeled as Black and generalized, despite the fact that we all probably came from different parts of the continent of Africa. And so, you know, it's interesting to hear this man respond to a video about race and call it a social construct and live in his own privilege of his whiteness. It's a privilege to know where your ancestors came from, a privilege that Black people don't have.
It's not only a privilege, it's an advantage. In a society that's constructed under white body deeming itself the supreme standard by which all bodies humanity shall be measured, in a structure like that, it is an advantage off top to be born in a white body. Now, what he wants to do and what he just did, which is a slick move, right? This all speaks to this white comfort complex. There is a whole, like, just like the prison industrial complex, there's a white comfort complex, and people are getting rich and fat off of it. And what it means is that they want to do everything they can to stir the emotions of their audience, who are mostly white people. And part of it is to keep them comfortable by saying, you're right, and those Black, brown, trans, brown people, right, are wrong. It's all about making them feel comfortable. What he did that was slick, is that he moved off of the structural pieces, which are the pieces that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the body pieces. I'm not talking about identity. There is no identity that Ben or any other white body is that bodies of culture also have not been. So bodies of culture have been Jewish, bodies of culture have been trans, bodies of culture have been poor, right? All of those identities that white bodies use to say, well, I'm not really like that because I'm also Jewish, or I'm not really like that because I'm also poor, or I'm not really like, right? They self-declare themselves as not like other white people. And what I want to say is that your individual identity is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is a structure that started in the 1600s. The first time you see white persons is in Virginia law after the Bacon Rebellion. I didn't do that. My ancestors didn't do that. Your ancestors didn't do that. The ancestors that did it were in white bodies. When they came up with the law that said white persons, when they came up with laws that says that people that look like me are less human structurally, the race question in this country is a species question first, right? It is Resmaa, is Sister Georgia, are they human or not? And the answer structurally and philosophically in this country has been no. Why? Because they are not white. So this isn't something that I created. This is something, a structural apparatus that said, when you look out there and you see a white body, that white body is human. When you see a brown body or indigenous body, that body is less human simply because of pigmentation and power and control. And the slick move that they always make is they want to make it about identity, as if there are not Black Jewish people that are catching hell in the Jewish community. Do you understand what I mean? So they don't want to talk about that, how it is an advantage in a society that is predicated on the white body being the supreme standard of humanness. What they want to do is decontextualize it and say things like, I should be judged on my character and my meritocracy. I should be judged on this. Well, you can't. You want to know why? Because your people developed a structure that you have been unwilling to dismantle. And what we're saying is either dismantle it or get out of the way. But we're going to continue to dismantle it.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to this because he says more.
And first of all, when Resmaa Menakem at the very beginning, an author, when he says at the beginning, there are thousands of George Floyds you never saw. Well, I mean, under what time context are we talking? Are we talking like the last several hundred years? Because then that's true. Are you talking about like the last several years? The answer, of course, is no. The number of Black unarmed men killed in the United States by cops is under 20 every single year.
That's inaccurate.
That is inaccurate.
That is simply inaccurate.
Yeah, and it's not. Let me. You can't say this, but I can say this. It ain't inaccurate. It's a damn lie, and he knows that. And in answer to his question, when I'm talking about what has happened to my people, I'm not talking about what happened to my people 2 years ago. I'm talking about what has happened and continues to happen to my people. Policing and people and white folks who self-deputize themselves have destroyed Black towns, have murdered Black people. My people for 250 years were raped legally. So when I'm talking about the thousands of George Floyds, I'm talking about my experience and my people's experience on this land. And here's the deal. When I'm talking, I'm not just talking about Black people. I'm also saying, okay, since you don't want to cop to the fact that you and your people and your ancestors created a white body supremacist society, and what I mean by that is a society that's predicated on the concept that your white skin is human and everybody that is not in white skin is not. That concept is not just a concept that was just used in America. It was used across America, across the world by England, Spain, Portugal, France, and the Netherlands. And all of them adhere to this concept of the Doctrine of Discovery, which means if they show up to a land that is not that is brown or Black or red or whatever, they get to discover that land. That was an agreement that they developed. It was called the Doctrine of Discovery. The piece about that is that those 5 countries shared what I call a knowledge helix. What I mean by that is you have somebody over in Portugal that's talking about who and what Black people are and who and what the savage indigenous people are. And then they create some type of philosophy about it. And then somebody, so that may happen in the science realm. Somebody who who is in education would read that as the basis for who and what Black and Indigenous people is, and then weave that into their construction. It is a European construction of who Black and Indigenous people are. And so what he wants to do is say, now we should just judge it for right now. But we don't just judge for right now, because the structure did not stop. The brutality, the land theft, the genocide, and the imperialism and the colonialism didn't just stop because Mr. Ben says that, okay, I only want to be judged by just my individual whiteness. Well, that would be nice if we hadn't had 400, 500, and 600 years of brutal rape on my people, 400, 500, 600 years of taking indigenous land, right? All across the world. This is not just a Black problem in America. This is a Black problem all across the world, and this is an indigenous problem all across the world. But he wants to decontextualize it and make it just about him or white people, because his idea of racism is individual, not structural.
Has the Washington Post responded about any of this backlash?
I will tell you what I haven't seen anything, but I will tell you what I did, because the sister who Nicole, who put this together, who did a great job. I reached out to her, because I know that when stuff blows like this, the first place that this energy gets blown through is those Black bodies, right? And then many times they're not protected. So I wanted her to know that she has people that are behind her. She has people that love her. And she did not do a bad job. She did a wonderful job. This is what happens when you push against white supremacy and white body supremacy, the idea that the white body is the standard of humanness. When you push against that, this structure will try and make you pay for it, right? And so I don't know what they've done. What I know is that I wanted to make sure that she knew she wasn't out here by herself.
And I can't help but ask, how has this impacted you? How are you doing?
Well, sis, I'm built for this. I'm built for this. I love this stuff. This stuff gets me up in the morning. My mama called me earlier today, and she said, think about it like this. If you wasn't doing nothing worthwhile, they wouldn't even have nothing to say about it.
That's right.
Right. And so that orients me, right? That the more they kick and scream and jump up and down and say, Resmaa, you're a racist. Resmaa, you're developing a cult, without I'm gonna use a term. Ain't nan one of them done read my book. Ain't nan one of them done taken a class. Ain't nan one. So their idea of who I am is irrelevant. Right. And so for me, I'm built for this stuff. I love this stuff. I stand on the backs of people who have dealt with a lot more than this. I stand on Martin Luther King's back. I stand on Malcolm X's back. I stand on Fannie Lou Hamer's back. I stand on Auntie Maxine's Waters' shoulders. You understand what I mean? I mean, this stuff that they doing is child's play. This one of the reasons why they jump around so much is because when it comes to race, white bodies as a collective and white people as a collective do not have any agility or efficacy when it comes to race, because they have not had to. This stuff, every time this type of stuff comes up for them, the reason why they get so mad is that they are genuinely surprised that Black people actually see this differently, that Indigenous people see this differently, that Asian and Mexican people see this differently. They are genuinely surprised. The reason why they're surprised is because in their day-to-day life, if they don't want to, they never have to contend with race. They never have to worry about, they never have to get any practices on. That can't happen for me. I can't walk out here and go, everybody's the same. I'm not picking up on anything. I don't even see color. That would be a fool's errand for a Black person to walk around thinking that race and that does not have an impact on me, and I need to watch for what that impact may be. he gets to do that. There's a level of freedom. So when he hears me talk, the kind of stuff that happens in his body, the reflexive rage, the reflexive anger, the reflexive the reflexive contempt, right? He doesn't even know where it comes from because he hasn't spent any time trying to examine it, not only by himself, but with other white people. And so for me, I love it. I love the fact that he's talking about it. I love it because hopefully there's some white people that hear it for the first time and go, what's that book? Yeah. How can I begin to look at the trauma elements that happened inside of me, that happened to my ancestors for 1,000 years of elite white bodies brutalizing poor white bodies? How can I begin to examine that? Right? I love it.
One of the things, and we'll get ready to wrap this up here, but one of the things that was called out a lot in those articles published that gave negative reviews about this project, which really is a very compelling and eye-opening project that is thought-provoking, and I think has the power to shift the narrative of race in our country. But one of the things in these negative reviews about this project that's pointed to a lot is the encouragement for white people to create accountability groups. And they quote in almost every article this idea of going through periods of deep shame. Can you speak to that with context so that people can fully understand?
Well, first off, I didn't say that, but but you're absolutely right. Your keen eye picked up on something.
So where did that come from? If you
that came from one of the other scholars. One of the other scholars said that, but they didn't say that. That's what I mean about they took it out of context.
Was it a person of color or was it a white person?
It was a white person.
So, okay. So that and I think it's important to clarify that because it's different in the Black community. If we're giving instruction to other people within the Black community, just like if white folks are, it's very different. And it wasn't attributed to a person.
Right.
And so I think that it's important to identify that was encouragement that was coming from a white person. Right. And so just by that by itself, it misrepresents the intent of the project.
Well, here's what they did. The reason why they said that is that they wanted to misappropriate that quote to me, right? That's the whole thing. That they put that out there, and they assumed that the Black body is the one that said it. Here's what I want people to understand: is that is actually not what was said. And I encourage people to go to the Washington Post and read this and look at it and listen to it. What was actually said was that when people are in those groups, one of the things that happens in a safe environment is that white bodies can begin to explore some of these pieces that may show up around shame, that may show up around guilt. Not that people need to come and we need to beat them into making sure that they are accountable and beat them into the shame piece. That was not the context. The context was that one of the things that happens, and one of the things that happens when these groups come together, is that white people over time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years together, they begin to develop relationships and a community and a culture together. And then that community and culture begins to hold them accountable around their whiteness and around their development and around the things that happens in their bodies that at one point they did not have a language for, but now they're doing it in a group they have a language for. The white supremacy, the individual niceness and kindness is inadequate to deal with the ravages of white body supremacy. And so we must deal with these things not only individually, but also communally, because the brutality that happened to my people, let's just say Black people, the brutality that happened to my people did not happen to us individually. The reason why police officers and slave catchers hung our people from bridges and trees was not for the people that were murdered and lynched, but was for the people who would be walking across those bridges, and it would be a warning to them. And so that is a communal horror and a communal terror that we must begin to deal with communally, not just individually. And so those white accountability groups that particular scholar was talking about, which I don't talk about. I don't talk about white accountability groups. I talk about culture building, right? And white people must develop a living, embodied anti-racist culture and practices and philosophy that does not exist within the white community, specifically around race. And so just with everything else, that was taken out of context in order to make the big black boogeyman show up so they can open up their purses and Ben Shapiro can reach in and take $1 out from the stuff that he's hawking on TV. That Tucker Carlson can reach in and charge exorbitant amounts to do speeches on the badness of black people and the goodness of white people.
Yeah, and now that you mention it, never heard them identify any of the white people who were a part of this project. I really only heard them identify you and the host. Resmaa, you're a person who is very intentional with the language that you use. You're known to many in your own community as a healer. You help people process historical trauma. How has it been, and how are you, I guess, making sense of your voice being taken out of context? And are you having any regret on participating in this project?
I love it. I love it. Do you realize that every one of our ancestors and every one of our elders have had their voice taken out of context? I mean, look at Martin Luther King. You would swear that Dr. Martin Luther King's only speech was "I have a dream." You would swear he never talked to garbage workers. You would swear that he never had said anything about Vietnam, right? When Dr. King was alive, he was the most hated man in America. But you couldn't tell it now. You have conservatives and racists and everybody else quoting Dr. King. Why? Because they love our elders when they turn into ancestors. When they love our ancestors because they can't speak up for what and correct what actually was said. So they love us when we're dead. And so when I'm seeing people like take my words out of context and do that, the first thing that pops into my mind is I'm going in the right direction. That's the right direction. Because I know that Fannie Lou Hamer dealt with the same thing. I know Sister Audre Lorde dealt with the same thing. I know that my brother Keith Ellison deals with the same thing. That's part of moving towards justice and freedom, is knowing that you will be looked at as the worst person in the world because you're pushing against power. You're pushing against something that wants to stay the same. And if that means that black people die and if it means that we don't care about making sure that black people can vote, right? We don't care about making sure that the police don't keep killing us, right? And we keep paying them and they keep killing us. That the moment that you speak out about that thing is that the moment that you will be liberated and at the moment that they will cast aspersions on your name. And so for me, every time it happens, I'm like, oh man, thank you for helping me stay oriented in the right direction. And that's the way we got to think about it. It is my job is to do what I can do for right now, right? And then hand it off once I become an ancestor to the next group. It ain't to get it across the line, just the same way that it wasn't W.E.B. Du Bois to get it across the line. It was his job to hand it to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. And so for me, somatic abolitionism is that way to do that. And so I'm not tired. I'm not upset. I ain't hurt. He purposely jacked my name up. That's what he did. Menakem, right? He knew. You can't tell me he didn't know what my name was. He knew what my name was. But that's the type of aggressive and viciousness that they want to do. And if you don't understand that when it comes to trying to usher in a living, embodied anti-racist culture, if you don't understand that, then you won't be in this movement for very long.
The Washington Post published this project, The New Normal.
Yeah.
At its full potential, what does it have the power to do?
Yeah.
At its full potential.
This is just so the one thing that you guys saw is just one of, I believe, of about a 5-part series. And I believe that what it has the capacity to do is exactly what it's doing. Stirring up conversation, beginning to have people be uncomfortable. White folks is so comfortable. They're comfortable with us not saying stuff. They're comfortable with us giving deference to them. And one of the things that this article or this whole project has done is said, just like the 1619 project, it says, your comfort is not my concern. The way that you see the world is the way that you see the world. You get to do that, but it is not my concern. And the way that you see the world is going to get everybody hurt. The way that you see the world will continue to have people like what happened on January 6th, where you had thousands of people decide that they were going to go into the Capitol and pee and crap all over the floor and hurt people and murder people. That if white bodies don't begin to culturally begin to access what they need to do in order to excavate and interrogate where all of that rage comes from, because the rage can't come from me. It can't be because of me. The rage has to be investigated. And I think what this thing has the capacity to do is to have people begin to search and look and in an embodied way begin to say, okay, why is it that I always go to this place? Why is it that I always look for Black bodies and indigenous bodies to blow all of this horror and terror through? What construction was made in order for me to be all right with taking indigenous land and then putting indigenous people in boarding schools and putting indigenous children in boarding schools and then taking their land and genociding them and then saying that I was a settler and that I have dominion over all else and all other things? How did that come to pass? And until white people begin to work on those pieces and stop trying to work on me and start working on each other, there ain't nothing that I can do about it. But what I can say is for Black and indigenous people, the things that you feel to be right in this, in your bones, in your spirit, in your soul, what I want to say to you is that it is absolutely and 100% true. This thing is like the upside down. Was down is up, and what is up is down. And you don't have to doubt yourself anymore. The vibes that you're picking up in this environment, that you are in danger, are absolutely true. And the way that these white folks act, when all I'm doing is saying the way that I believe things to be, when all that brother Colin Kaepernick did was just kneel on a football field, when all that brother George Floyd said was, please get up. That's all I'm asking you to do. Just get up. When that is met with derision and he should have did this and he should have did that, that's when you know you're dealing with a sickness among white people that they must deal with themselves. And so for me, I think that this project has the capacity to open this up and make and have white people and Black people and indigenous people begin to look at these pieces, but we don't come to the table from in the same position.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the 1619 project. I was thinking about that in comparison to this project as well, because they have started to attack that project as well.
Not just the project, the woman, Sister Hannah. They tried to keep her from getting tenure, right? They tried to take that away from her. They tried to say that this 1619. See, anytime you affirm your existence as a human being, the white body collective sees that as an attack. Why? Because they're not used to you affirming yourself as a human being. Think about this. It is a relatively new occurrence, sis, that me and you could be sitting here talking the way that we're talking and be somewhat sure that there's not a lynch party waiting for us. That's new. That is a new occurrence. That's not an old occurrence. That is a new occurrence, right? It is relatively new that you can have any dominion and stewardship over your own body. For most of our history, our bodies were raped and bred legally for 250 years. So for you to have a voice in your Black body and have a platform to say what you want to say is a threat, and they don't even know why it's a threat. One of the reasons why it's a threat is that you are not supposed to be here. You are not supposed to be doing what you're doing. How did we not beat that out of you? How did we not rape that out of you? How did we not terrorize that out of you? And so anytime you have voice that does not lean into their comfort, they because they don't have a living embodied anti-racist culture that they can unpack that with, they must attack you. They must attack me. They must attack the 1619 Project because they have no other place to put it.
Mm-hmm. Resmaa, any final words you want to leave our audience with today?
You are not defective. There is nothing wrong with you. Everything you know to be true when you walk into your job and you surrounded by white people and you feel like you're under attack and you're under danger, but ain't nobody called you the N-word, but it still feels like you need to protect yourself. That ain't because you crazy. That's because you have in your bones something that has been passed down from your ancestors to say you are under attack. They don't want you here and they have no room for you. You're going to have to make your room. And I want Black and indigenous bodies and bodies of culture to understand that stop doubting yourself when you're picking up on this stuff. Start talking with each other, start turning towards each other instead of turning on each other. And I love you. That's all that's the last piece I want to say.
Thank you so much for being here with us. If you have not already, please be sure to check out The New Normal. It is a 5-part series project featuring Brother Resmaa Menakem, who is a New York Times bestselling author. It is a phenomenal series that will change your life. And you know that because it is really getting under the skin of some prominent white folk.
And check out and also check out my grandmother's hands and I got free stuff at resmaa.com and on Instagram. Thank
Absolutely.
you, sis.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Bye-bye.